In just 3 years, one man turned the murder capital of the world into a country safer than the United States. Over 89,000 people locked up. Gang violence reduced by 98%. And now, the entire world is either copying him or condemning him as a dictator. This is the story you need to hear. Let me paint you a picture of El Salvador in 2019. Imagine waking up every single day knowing there's a better chance you'll be murdered than in an active war zone. That was El Salvador. 2,398 homicides in 2019. That's 103 murders per 100,000 people at its peak in 2015, the highest in the world outside a war zone. One murder every single hour. A nation of just 6 million people held hostage by two gangs, MS-13 and Barrio 18. These weren't just street thugs. They ran territories like military zones. Extortion rackets squeezed every business owner. Bus drivers paid taxes or died. Teachers, shop owners, children, no one was safe. Entire neighborhoods were no-go zones even for police. Families couldn't send their kids to school. Businesses closed. Anyone with money fled to America. El Salvador was dying a slow, violent death. And the world? They just shrugged. Another failed Latin American state. Then came Nayib Bukele. Bukele wasn't your typical politician. Look at him. Baseball cap, leather jacket, Twitter troll. This isn't a president. This is a CEO. At 37 years old in 2019, he was the youngest president in Salvadoran history. A millennial. Palestinian descent. Former businessman and mayor. And here's the key. He didn't come from the old political class. For decades, El Salvador was controlled by two parties, ARENA and the FMLN, left versus right, the same tired corruption and failure. Bukele created his own party, Nuevas Ideas, New Ideas. No left, no right. Just results. His campaign was simple. I'm going to fix this. The old way doesn't work. Watch me. In June 2019, Bukele took office with a bold promise to destroy the gangs. But nobody expected what came next. First, Bukele tried the traditional approach. The territorial control plan, police patrols, military deployments, intelligence operations. Homicides dropped 50% in his first year. Impressive, but not enough. Then, in March 2022, everything changed. 62 people were murdered in a single weekend. Gang retaliation for government pressure. Bukele had enough. On March 27, 2022, he declared a state of exception. Here's what that meant. Constitutional rights suspended. Military deployed nationwide mass arrests authorized without warrants. Gang members could be held indefinitely. And then, the arrests began. Week 1, 6,000 arrested. Month 1, 25,000 arrested. By October 2025, over 89,000 people behind bars. That's nearly 1.7% of the entire population, the highest incarceration rate in the world. Higher than the United States. Higher than China. Higher than anywhere. But here's where it gets wild. Bukele didn't just arrest them, he built a fortress to hold them. In February 2023, Bukele unveiled CCOT, the Terrorism Confinement Center in Tekaluka, 45 miles east of the capital. This isn't a prison. This is a statement. 40,000 prisoner capacity. That's not a prison. That's the capacity of Fenway Park. Filled entirely with gang members, 8 massive pavilions. Each cell holds 65 to 70 inmates, no windows. No natural light. Inmates wear white uniforms, shaved heads, no shoes. 23-hour lockdown per day. No gang colors, no communication, no hierarchy. $115 million to build. Surveillance everywhere. Completely isolated. Bukele released footage to the world. Thousands of tattooed gang members, shirtless, packed into cells, faces down. The message was clear. This is what happens if you terrorize my country. Human rights groups exploded. torture, inhumane, dictatorship. But in El Salvador, celebrations in the streets. Let me give you the numbers, because this is where it gets insane. 2019, before Bukele's crackdown, 2,398 homicides. 2022, 495 homicides. 2023, 214 homicides. 2024, 114 homicides. Let that sink in. 114 murders in an entire year. That's a homicide rate of 1.9 per 100,000 people. You know what the US rate is? Over 5 per 100,000. El Salvador is now safer than the United States and Canada. But it's not just numbers. The entire feeling of the country changed. Tourism exploded, a 22% increase in 2024 to 3.9 million visitors. Beaches packed with families, 912 consecutive days without a single murder reported in mid-2025. Salvadorans who fled to America, they're coming back. GDP grew 2.6% in 2024, with foreign investment steadily rising. The World Bank, once skeptical, now calls El Salvador one of the safest nations in Latin America. But here's the question nobody wants to ask. What did this cost? Because it wasn't free. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the UN, they all say the same thing. Mass arbitrary detention, torture, abuses. Over 8,000 people have been released, meaning they were innocent. 8,000. Arrested based on rumours, appearance, or being in the wrong place. Police officers admitted they had quotas, arrest targets to meet. Some people were grabbed because they had tattoos, or lived in gang neighbourhoods, or someone said they were suspicious. Families describe months without contact with detained relatives. Allegations of beatings, sexual violence against women and girls, deaths in custody. By 2025, Bukele's legislature had consolidated power, effectively clearing the path for indefinite rule, reinterpreting constitutional limits that once stood in his way. Human rights groups fled the country. Journalists face harassment. Constitutional checks? Gone. Freedom House downgraded El Salvador's freedom rating. The US State Department expressed concern, and Bukele's response? Results speak loud. Here's the part that drives critics insane. Bukele's approval rating in 2025? Between 85 and 91%. That's not a typo. 9 out of 10 Salvadorans support him. In February 2024, he was re-elected with nearly 85% of the vote, despite a constitutional ban on consecutive terms that his court simply ignored. Why? Because to average Salvadorans, the choice is obvious. Would you rather have your rights or your life? A mother who can now send her daughter to school without fear of gangs? She doesn't care about judicial independence. A bus driver who doesn't pay extortion anymore. He's not worried about democratic backsliding. The street vendor whose shop isn't burned down. She calls Bukele a hero. And this is where the global debate gets messy. Because now, the entire world is watching. And everyone has an opinion. The critics say, this is authoritarianism disguised as security. You can't trade human rights for safety. Innocent people are suffering. He's dismantling democracy. The supporters say, the old democratic way failed for decades. Gangs killed over 100,000 people. Where were the human rights groups then? Safety is a human right. Sometimes you need a strong hand to fix a broken country. And here's the wildest part. Other countries are copying him. Ecuador's president launched a similar crackdown. Honduras is watching. Even politicians in Guatemala and Mexico reference the Bukele model. Conservative leaders worldwide, Trump, Milei in Argentina, Modi supporters in India, they praise him as a strong man who gets things done. Meanwhile, the World Bank still funds El Salvador. The US hasn't cut ties. The IMF negotiates loans. Why? Because no one can deny the results. Oh, and by the way, in 2021, Bukele made Bitcoin legal tender, the first country in the world to do so. El Salvador now holds over 6,200 Bitcoin, purchased at an average of around $42,000 per coin. That's 1.6% of the entire national GDP sitting in crypto reserves. Critics called it reckless. The IMF warned against it. But Bukele doubled down, even buying 1 Bitcoin per day since November 2022. Now, with Bitcoin surging to all-time highs in late 2025, El Salvador's crypto bet has nearly tripled in value, turning what seemed like a gamble into a massive win. Tourism to Bitcoin Beach is booming. The country hosts global crypto conferences. It's part of the brand. Love it or hate it, it's working. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. Is Nayib Bukele a visionary who saved his country, or a dictator who destroyed its democracy? Can you have safety without freedom? Can you have order without justice? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. El Salvador was a failed state. Democracy wasn't working. Gangs ruled. People were dying. The democratic world offered thoughts and prayers, but no solutions. Meanwhile, Salvadorans were being slaughtered. Bukele said, "I'll fix this. I don't care what the world thinks." And he did. But at what cost? 89,000 arrested, over 8,000 innocent people caught in the net. Constitutional rights suspended for over 3 years. A president who now faces no meaningful limits on his power. The world is mad because Bukele broke the rules. He didn't play by the democratic playbook. He did what the textbooks say you shouldn't do. And it worked. So what does that say about the playbook? El Salvador is the most controversial experiment in modern governance. A test case that asks, when democracy fails, what comes next? Some countries are studying Bukele as a model. Others, but one thing is undeniable. Nayib Bukele changed El Salvador forever. Whether that's for better or worse, I'll let you decide. So I have to ask you a question, and I want you to be honest in the comments. If your family was in danger, would you vote for him? Yes or no? I'll see you in the comments.